63a, 5 lines down by the 2 dots. The first word is pshita.
Thank you.
Little basement. Okay. More about technical laws of wording in documents and how we interpret the wording in the documents. So, pshita. Amar yachlok ploni b'nichsai. If you say the word yachlok has yachlok means half. It means to divide up, but it has an implication of half. So if you say, you will split the nechasim of ploni, so then the guy acquires half the field. Now, tenu chelek leploni b'nechasai, I'm going to give a chelek. Not I'm going to split, right? I'm going to give a chelek to ploni of my nechas. You're selling him land, and the wording you used was that you're going to give a chelek to ploni of your possessions. So now we're going to wonder, this word chelek, we just said a second ago when you say yachlok ploni b'nechasai, so that has an implication of half, because to divide up usually means half. However, the word chelek also means a part. Now, what's a part? We're going to go with the minimal amount. So now we're going to have a series of cases where you're trying to figure out what exactly, how do you divide up something which was sold with this phraseology? Tenu chelek leploni b'nechasai. My, what's the halacha? Amar Ravina Bar Kisi Tashma. We learned in a brayso the Tanya. HaOmer tenu chelek leploni bebor. So you own a pit with water inside, and you want to give part of that pit, part of the water in that pit, to your friend. And the way you phrased it was tenu chelek leploni bebor. Give a chelek to ploni of the bor. So now, the maximum amount you're referring to is only half the water in the bor. The minimal amount you're referring to is the smallest amount. So how do we divide up the case now? You can't give him for sure half because maybe the word chelek only means a small portion. So here's what you do. Sumchis. So Sumchis has this famous statement in other places in Shas called Hamamun mutal besafek cholkim. Sumchis, without getting too complicated, he says that there are certain cases when you have a doubt about whose money something belongs to, right? So I think the famous case is when an ox scores a cow, right, and then the cow gives birth. And at some point you acquired the cow. So when did it get gored? Did the cow get gored after you owned it or before you owned it? And the difference is, does he have to pay for the fetus of the cow? I think that's the case. But Sumchis says when you have money in doubt, what do? Mammon hamutal besafek, mammon that's lying in a doubt, gets split. That's his famous halachic statement. So Sumchis says like this. So let's think about it. The most the guy could mean is half the water in the pit. So is half the water in the pit. Now, he's not going to give more than half the water. Now he phrases, it sounds like he's phrasing, I'm going to give you half of that. So once again, the most amount of water a person would give is only half. This guy is saying about that half water, I will give you a chelek of the half. So now, what does it mean, a chelek of the half? So Sumcha says, Ein pachos mirivia. This guy is not going to get less than a fourth. Why? Because generally a person will only give really half his water to, I think in this case is to water the animals, to give the animals to drink. And the guy phrased it as, I'll give you a chelek of that. So now, which money is under dispute? So there's half of the water in a pit, and the guy said, I'll give you a chelek. So either he means, one second. Double check one thing. Just double check one thing. sorry. There's right, half the water in the pit. Either chelik means half. So now they're disputing that. So the buyer says you owe me half, and the seller says no. I only owe you a small fraction. So Mammon Amutal Besafek Cholkin, that halacha would tell you what's the money that's in dispute. It's really half of the half, because we can't give the buyer the whole amount because maybe he's only owed a minimal fraction. So half of water is in dispute. So that's why Simcha says, I'm only going to give you won't get less than a fourth. A fourth for sure belongs to you, because they're arguing over a half, and so that half that they're arguing about, if you split it, it becomes a fourth. So he for sure gets the minimal amount of water, whatever that minimal amount is. And also, since the water in dispute here is a half, and that half now, Simcha says you would split it, I would get a fourth. So you don't get less than a fourth. Now, let's say the guy wants to give you water for your barrel, not for your animals to drink, but for your barrel. You want to fill up. You do. You want to fill up a barrel to irrigate your animals, to give them water. So, how much do you get? So the general amount is. So the Rashbam explained that half of the pit, only half the pit you would use to fill up the barrel. And when you say you want to give half of that, right? So you wrote in your document, I'm going to give you water for a barrel. Generally, people only give half of their pit. That's the most they're ever going to give for a barrel. And now you phrased it, I'm going to give you a chelik of that. So chelik means a half of that. So we're only talking about really a fourth. The most the guy's going to get is a fourth. That's the most he's going to get. So what do you do? So the most he'll get is a fourth, because half of the pit is what's generally used to feed your animals. The phraseology in the document was to know chelik. Chelik could imply half. So now it's a half of a half. A half of a half is a fourth. That's the most the guy is going to get. The least amount the guy is going to get is a small little amount, whatever that small amount is, the smallest amount possible. So now they're arguing over a fourth. A fourth is the most that a person can get. Sumcha says when you have a dispute over money, so you split it. So you take this fourth of the water and you split it, and you end up with 1/8. So Sumcha says you'll get at least 1/8, meaning you get 1/8 and a little bit more. The smallest fraction for sure goes to you. That's not in doubt. However, this money that is in doubt, that'll go to you. Let's just clarify it in case it wasn't clear. You have water in a pit. So the first case was that you say, I'm going to give you I'm going to give you a chelik of the water in the pit. So chelik might mean half. So now they're debating over half of the water in a pit. The rule part, for sure, the smallest part of the water, that for sure goes to you. He's for sure giving you something. The water in dispute is now regarding half of the pit. First halacha was, since that's where the dispute is, you split it, and you're going to get a fourth. The next case was he wants to give you water for your barrel. Water for a barrel, we're only talking about half the water in a pit. No one gives more than that to fill up a barrel for their animals. So now, on half of a pit, he said, I'll give you a chelik. Chelik might mean half. Half of a half is going to refer to as a fourth. So the money in dispute is a fourth of the water. A fourth of the water split into two is going to be an eighth. Ein pachos mishminis lekedera. Ein pachos mishminis lekedera. He wants to give you a pot. He wants you to fill up your pot of water. He wants to sell you enough water. You should fill up your pot. So now, usually people don't give more than. This is gonna get a little complicated. How much do people usually give for their kedera, for their pot of water? Is usually only a fourth. The most they're going to give for a pot of water is a fourth. And now the guy says, I'll give you a chelik of that. So we're talking about now half of a fourth. So what's half of a fourth? Eighth. Okay, one second. So how do we get to 12? 1 second. Okay.
Because it's a third.
So why is it a third? Yeah, why is it a third? Yeah, right. No one gives for a pot to drink more than a third of the pit. So you're starting off with only a third of the pit is given for a person to drink. And on that third, you say, I'm going to give you a chelik. So maybe we're referring to half of a third. What's half of a third? A sixth. So the money in dispute is a sixth. That's what's being disputed over here. The halacha is you split that sixth, and therefore you get to a 12th. Ein pakos miyud beis. So just once again, whatever the amount that's usually given for either a person or for his animals, now that a person said, I'll give you a chelik of that, his maximum he's referring to is going to be a half of whatever is normally given. Since that half is under dispute, Sumcha says we split that, and you're going to get no less than that. So those are the little bit technical, complicated mathematics, but those are those halachas. Okay, moving on. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a brisa that a ben Levi. So now you have a son of a Levi. Oh, sorry, you're right. Sorry, thank you. Litfiach, you're giving him water just for a cup to drink. So now, ein pachos mit shisha asar. When you give her water to drink, then there's no less than 16th. Why? The normal amount you give from water in a cup is going to be only an eighth. It's only going to be an eighth, a quarter. And now you said a chelik of that. So the maximum you want to give is half of the amount that's normally given for a cup of water. So that's only going to be an eighth. Now that eighth of water is under dispute. The halacha is we split it, and the halacha is that we split it, and you get a 16th of water. Yeah, good catch, Steve. Letafiach, a klikatan, a small little vessel to drink from. Ein pakos mishisha asar. So every number here, every final number here is really half of the most that the person will get. So shisha here, half of yeah. You're always splitting. You're cutting in half whatever money is in dispute. So if the result was a 16th, so the money in dispute was an eighth. If the final amount was a 12th, the money in dispute was going to be a sixth. If it was an eighth, then it's going to be a fourth. Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you, Steve. Tana Rabbanan, Ben Levi Shemachar Sadal Yisrael, a son of a Levi, who sells a field to Yisrael, but he adds the following stipulation: Amar lo, al menas shemaisa rishon shali. So, a Levi, son of a Levi, he's selling a field to a Yisrael. Now, this begins a long conversation, the whole next Talmud. What if you put a clause into it? We saw this a little bit yesterday, the end of yesterday. You put an unnecessary clause into a document. So, in this case, the unnecessary clause is, I'll sell you a field, but on condition that you give me my rishon. Right? You have to give me the first tithes that go to a Levi. So we're going to see that that's really a big problem because that hasn't come to the world yet. And you can't really sell something that hasn't come to the world yet. So when the guy says on condition that you're going to give me first tithes, we're actually going to interpret that to mean that he's still keeping some of his field. He's not selling his whole field. What he means to really say is, I'm selling you a field. However, part of that field is going to be still left for me. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. Ben Levi Shemachar Sadal Yisrael v'Amar lo Almanasha Ma'aser Rishon Shali. So we say, Ma'aser Rishon Shalo. He's going to end up getting Ma'aser Rishon. V'im Amar li ulebanai. If he says to me and to my children that I'll only sell you the field if you give me and my children Ma'aser Rishon. So now, if the guy dies, if the Levi dies, mace, the Yisrael, the guy that bought the field, yitain lebanov. Ve'im amar lo. Let's say he says, "I'll give you the field. However, you owe me ma'aser rishon kol zman she'asada zu biyadcha. You owe me ma'aser rishon as long as this field is in your possession." So now, macher, let's say that guy now took that field and sold it, meaning the Levi sold it to a Yisrael, but the Yisrael sold it to somebody else. And then he bought it back. Ein lo alav klum. He doesn't have to, he's not bound by this stipulation. Why? Because once he sold it to somebody else and then bought it back, he bought back whatever stipulations that field came with. Anything that field came with. And that field was never bound by this stipulation. Right? So the Levi sold it to Ruvain. Ruvain sold it to Shimon. When Shimon owned the field, he wasn't bound by this stipulation of having to give ma'aser rishon. So now when Shimon sells the field back to Ruvain, Ruvain is also not bound by whatever Shimon wasn't bound by. So in that case, he does not have to give the Levi ma'aser rishon. Okay. So now we're going to ask, said, hold on. How can you obligate the Yisrael to give the Levi ma'aser rishon? Just because they stipulated this in the document, but there's a big problem here. Ein adam makne davar shelo ba'al olam. You're not allowed to sell something which has not come to the world yet. So ma'aser rishon hasn't grown yet. So how can you obligate the Yisrael to give his tithes, to give the ma'aser to the Levi? No futures. No futures. Right, correct. So on that says the Gemara, okay. Kevan the Amrle Almanas Shemaiser Rishon Shali. We're now going to interpret that. It's an extra clause in a legal document. It's got to be there for a reason. We're going to interpret it to help out the seller. So it's Shiyure Shaire Lemako Meiser. What he means to say is, I'm leaving over a place for my Meiser. So whenever we have this Almanas, what it means is, he really wants this sale to go through. However, to obligate the guy to give him back meiser is not possible. So what must he mean? He must mean that he's leaving off. He's retaining some part of his field. Meaning that, a field produces meiser. So by saying almanas, that you're going to owe me meiser, what I'm saying is I want to retain part of the field. Yeah, okay. So now, Reish Lakish takes this concept and wants to derive a halachic ruling from here, and we'll see if it's going to work. Amar Reish Lakish. Okay, Zos Omeris. So this teaches us, Hamocher bayis lechaveru. You sell a house to your friend. Va'amar lo almanas shediyuta elyona shali. As long as the higher part of the house is mine, the upper floor of the house is mine. What is the diyuta elyona? It's a roof on my house, right? Which has a fence, and we know that we learned earlier when you sell a house regularly, that area is not included. If it's 10 tvachim and it has a fence, it's not included in the sale of the house. However, this seller, when he said, "I'm going to sell you the house," he said on condition that the diyuta elyona is shali. So what's the halacha? Diyuta ha'elyona shalo. Yeah, he gets to keep the diyuta elyona, the higher level of the house, the roof with the fence. Now, the problem is, whenever you sell a house and you don't specify anything other than the house itself, you always get to keep the roof of the house. So what exactly are we learning from here? That when you sell a house, if you say this almanas, that the higher part of the house, the roof belongs to you. The roof anyways belongs to you. You don't need the almanas, right? So if you don't need the almanas, this condition in the document to retain the roof of the house, it must be that this condition wants to give you something more that you don't already have. So turning the page, what could that be? L'mai hilchasa. For what is Reish Lakish teaching us? That this almanas, you get to keep some of the roof of the house. You always get to keep the roof of the house unless you specifically specified that you're selling it also. but until you say that, it's yours. So what is Reish Lakish saying? Oh, now I know from your statement of putting a stipulation, which is not relevant, we're going to interpret it to your benefit. How do you interpret this statement to your benefit? Lemai hilchasa, and here we have a machlokas. Rav Zvid Amar, Shim Ratza Lahotzi Ba Zizin Motzi. Okay, so one line, but a little background. It seems like you sold the house and the courtyard next to the house. And now, when you sold the house, you made a stipulation. I'm selling you, but it's only on condition I get to keep the roof of the house. To which we learn that that doesn't mean anything because you anyways get to keep the roof of your house. However, you added in this extra clause to a document. And we're now extrapolating from the previous Amud that whenever you add in this extra clause, it must mean you're referring to something else for your benefit. So says Rav Zvid, you retain the rights that you're allowed to have protrusions going into the chutzner, into the courtyard. So even though you sold the guy your house and your courtyard, by saying almanas on condition that I get to keep some of the roof, so you actually retain for yourself a part of the courtyard, which now allows you to have protrusions go into the courtyard. And that's just like our earlier halacha, that when you say on condition that you give me ma'aser rishon, what you mean is you're actually leaving off some of the field for yourself. You're retaining part of the field. When you sell a house and the chutzner and the courtyard next door, by saying this almanas, you're actually retaining part of the courtyard. Now, it's interesting. The Rashbam points out, we're only going to say this rule that when you put in a stipulation, which doesn't have any real relevance, we're going to do it for your benefit. But the Rashbam points out, it's only for you. It's not for your children. Meaning, we're not going to give over that piece of land. They will not be able to have protrusions go into the friend's courtyard. Yeah, we just interpret it right now for your benefit, but we don't fully gift it to you. Yeah, okay. That's Rav Zvid. Rav Papa Amar, he argues on Rav Zvid, and he says, Shim Ratza Livnos Aliyah Al Gaba Bona. What you could do is, by saying this stipulation, what it means is you retain the right that if you ever want to build on top of the house, as long as it won't damage the house, you have the right to do that. Yeah. Now, I believe the Gemara is going to conclude later. I think the Rashbam points this out, that we're referring to a case. I guess we'll see. Yeah, we're not referring to just building something brand new on top of the roof. Rather, Rav Papa is specifically talking about if this were to fall down, if this house were to fall down, then the seller retains the right to rebuild the roof in the event that it collapses. But I guess that's really, that we're going to see a little bit later. So Rav Papa says that when you say this almanas, that you get to keep the higher story of the house, what it means is if that house were to collapse, so you'll retain the right to rebuild the roof. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Fine. So says the Gemara, I understand Rav Zvid's interpretation of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish said, Zos Omeres, this teaches us, this rule that almanas, a stipulation in a document, can be interpreted to leave off a part of the field. So Rav Zvid says it allows you to leave a part of your courtyard, and therefore you can put your protrusions from the house into that part of the courtyard. So Bishmal Rav Zvid, Hanu de Katani Zos Omeres, that I understand. I understand that it tells me I can leave off also a part of my courtyard. they're very similar halachas. However, Elul Rav Papa, according to Rav Papa, you're not retaining a part of the field. We're just interpreting this line for your benefit, that if it ever falls, you retain the right to rebuild it. So according to Rav Papa, Mai Zos Ameris, what does it mean? This teaches us. So the Rashbam gives background that just the interpreting a stipulation in a document which is irrelevant and you're making it relevant, that's not a novelty over here by our case of the Meiser. That we're going to learn later on Samach Daled and Aleph, on the next Amud. What was novel over here was that when you have this almanas, this stipulation, you actually retain a right of the field. That part was the novelty. So according to Rav Zvid, it's very good. You retain a right to your courtyard. But according to Rav Papa, basically all Rav Papa is saying is that we found a way to interpret the stipulation to your benefit. So we're asking on Rav Papa. So that's going to be on the next Amud. That's going to be a Mishnah on the next Amud. So we didn't need this Ben Levi case that we had earlier to teach us that. Says the Gemara, you're right, Kasha, you're right. According to Rav Papa's interpretation of Reish Lakish, the Zos Omeres, this teaches us, remains a difficult use of language, because really we can learn that from a Mishnah on the next Amud, and we don't need to learn from here. Okay. Continuing. Amar Rav Dimi min Naharda. Rav Dimi from Naharda said the following. Haiman demazvin le beisa lechavre. A person that sells a house to his friend. So more about vague wording in documents of sales. Afal gav de kasale umka veruma. Sarich lemichtav le kanilach mitahom arav ad rom harakia. So now, a person sells a house to his friend. So he writes, I'm selling you the house, not only the house, but the depth and really the heights. Vague language, referring to something lower, umka, and something higher, roma. So says the Gemara, if you want to, tzarich lemichtav le kani lach mitahom ara v'ad roma rakia. So now, what does he want to sell to his friend? He wants to sell him the different pits and reservoirs of water that he has dug in his house, where he stores his water. So if he wants to do that, just writing the depths and the height is not enough. 1 second, sorry. Yeah. Why? Because all that says when you write down a document the depths and the heights of a house, you're just really selling the land under your house, that you have now the ability to dig into that land. Yeah. So once again, you want to sell this guy the reservoirs of water you have in your house. It says the Gemara, you have to write, I'm selling you from the depths of the earth, right, to the heights of the heavens. Then you've acquired those reservoirs. Ma'itaima. So why doesn't the regular phraseology of umka veruma, depths and heights, why isn't that enough? Because umka veruma bestama lokani. That's not going to acquire you the reservoir in your house. Ahani umka veruma lemikni umka veruma. That only is going to acquire land under your house, the ability to dig there. Veruma. Vahani mitahom ara. Vahani mitahom ara vadrom arakia lemikni borvados. If you add in the words from the depths of the ground, vadrom arakia, then you could acquire the bor vidos umechilos. I think mechilos is also another kind of pit, right? Yeah, other excavations. Other excavations. Yeah, okay, fine. So basically the halacha was that if you want to sell the reservoir of water, you have to make sure you add in the words from the depths of the ground. That's going to include the pit. But just writing a house and its depths will only include the ability to excavate and dig under the house, obviously as long as it doesn't damage the person's house. Yeah. Okay. Lema misayele, maybe this is a support to the following mission that we're going to have coming up soon. When you sell a regular house, you just write bias. So below esabor, below esados, you don't sell the cistern and the reservoirs. Afal pisha kasavlo umkavaruma. Even though you wrote in the document, I'm selling you the house and its depths and its heights, but that doesn't include a bore. So this is like, this statement is a great support for this other statement on the next amud. They both seem to say that even when you write kavaruma, it does not include your reservoir or your cistern, the place where you hold your water. Now, the isalka daitach bistama kani kavaruma lahani kavaruma lemikna borvados umechilos the low cost of lay. 1 second. Okay, the isaka daitach bistama. Maybe if you'll tell me that in general, just a regular, just the stama kani kavaruma, you usually can acquire the depths, right? I mean, like this. What's your starting point when you sell a house? Does that include the land under it or not? That's step one. Step two is when you sell a house and you write down kavaruma, that includes the digging under the house. Step three is when you sell a house and you write me'omek avara from the depths of the ground, that'll include everything else. So says the Gemara, the Isaka, I think we're rejecting this. No, we're gonna bring a proof to it now. The Isaka daitach bistama kani kavaruma. If you're gonna say that in general, when you sell a house, that includes the depths, the excavations, and the digging under the house. So now, when you write down kavaruma, lahani kavaruma lemikni borvados umechilos. I'm confused. Yeah. Okay. Just to clarify, Rav Dimi said, right? According to Rav Dimi, if you want to acquire the cistern and the reservoirs of the house, you have to write from the depths of the ground, and then you've acquired it. So now we have a Mishnah that says that when you sell a house, you don't include the cistern and the reservoir of water. Now, the bistama kani kavaruma, and therefore lahani kavaruma lemikne bor bedos umechilos. Maybe you'll say that. Maybe you'll say that when you write in kavaruma, that's going to acquire the bor bedos. So that Mishnah that says that when you didn't specify anything, so then you have not acquired the bor. So then when you do write this, so then that will acquire the cistern and the reservoir. So that would be a good support to Rav Dimi, who says that just without specifying, you've not acquired the bor or the dus. So I'm a little bit confused. Okay, 1 second. When is it? Got a little stumped. Okay, let's try again. So, Lema Misayele, Veloas Abor, Veloas Adus. The Mishnah later on said that when you sell a house, so those things aren't included. So now, the Isakadaitach, if you're going to tell me that even though you didn't write down Varuma, you still acquire the land under the house. And therefore, yeah, okay, very good. Let's say that when you don't write the words the depths of the house, you anyways you've acquired what's under the house for excavation. Therefore, when you write varuma, when you actually write the depths of the house, that's extra language. That's extra. It's unnecessary. You can't tell me it refers to acquiring the things under the house for digging, because that you acquire anyways. So therefore, that language will help to acquire the bor and the dus. So that would be a support for Rav Dimi. Right? And therefore, when the Mishnah said that you don't acquire the pit, it's because it's where you didn't write anything. If you were to write varuma, so then maybe that would work. But over there, you didn't write that, so therefore it didn't work. Now, yeah, but says the Gemara, hold on, maybe that Mishnah doesn't prove you anything. Because who says that you wrote anything into that Mishnah? Maybe that Mishnah is just talking about a case where you wrote nothing in the document. The low cost of lay. You just wrote nothing. And therefore, it had nothing to do with our case of where you write something, but you can interpret it for the positive. So says the Gemara, what do you mean? The Mishnah says, it says there that even though he wrote varuma, he still does not acquire the pit. So that sounds exactly like Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi said that when you write varuma, even though you wrote varuma, it's still not going to acquire for you the pit. So that's just like the Mishnah over there. So really that Mishnah is a good support, because the Mishnah shows us that even when you write down the depths, you still have not acquired the cisterns and the reservoirs. So really that Mishnah is a great support to this statement of Rav Dimi. So it says the Gemara, not necessarily. You could interpret the Mishnah like this. Hachikamer, afa pi shelo kasavlo. Afa pi shelo kasavlo, it's kimisha kasav dami. You can interpret it to mean that even though you didn't write varuma, but it's as if you wrote varuma. It's as if you did write varuma. Yeah, the Mishnah says even though you didn't write the depth and the height, but it's as if you wrote it, and therefore you acquire the space below and above the house. So now, it's been a little confusing. Let's just clarify. Rav Dimi said that when you write down varuma, the depths of the house, you only acquire what's directly under the house, is the digging for it. To acquire the reservoir, you have to write more than that. You have to write that it's going from the depths of the ground. That Mishnah on the next Amud says that you don't acquire the reservoir, even though you wrote down varuma. Even though you wrote down varuma, the depths, you still have not acquired the reservoir. Says the Gemara, that's a great support to Rav Dimi. Now says the Gemara, says not necessarily. Maybe you can reread the Mishnah like this. Even though you actually wrote nothing, when the Mishnah says you wrote something, it doesn't mean you wrote something. It means you wrote nothing. However, the Mishnah is telling you, even by writing nothing, right? It's as if you wrote varuma. It's as if you wrote the depths of the house. Because when you sell a house, even without writing depths, you still acquired the land under the house. And now, if you were to actually write just the word depths, what could that be? It must be referring to more than just the ground under the house. It must be referring to the pits and the reservoirs. So if that would be true, that's no longer support for Rav Dimi, because Rav Dimi says even when you have the words umka written in the document, you have not acquired the reservoirs of water. You only acquire what's directly under you, meaning the digging rights under the house. But if our Mishnah is telling us that when you write nothing, it's as if then you still acquire digging rights. If you write anything, even just writing the depths, just umka, that's going to acquire for you even the reservoirs of the house. So therefore, that's not going to be like Rav Dimi. So, haki kamer, aval pisha lo kasav lo, but it's kamisha kasav dami. Even though it didn't write it, but it's like you wrote it. Lemikne umkabruma, to automatically acquire the rights to dig under the house. However, lemikne bor bedusum mechilos. However, to acquire the actual pit and the different diggings and excavations, so then ikasav like umkabruma kani. If you would write down depths into the document, then you've acquired not only the digging rights, but you've acquired even the reservoirs and cisterns of water. The ilo kasav lo kani. And if you don't write it, then you've not acquired it. So if that would be true, then that would no longer be a support for Rav Dimi. So long story short, Rav Dimi said that when you sell a house and you write just sell a house, then you've acquired only the house. If you would write the word umka, depths, you've acquired digging rights to the house. If you write down umka da'ara, the depths of the ground, then you have acquired not only digging rights, but you've acquired also the different pits and cisterns in your house. And the Gemara wanted to know, is the Mishnah on the next Amud a proof to Rav Dimi? That's what it sounds like. Or if you reinterpret the Mishnah, it just knocks it down one level. So your starting point is one up, meaning you can interpret the Mishnah when you sell a house regularly, it already includes the digging rights. So if you write basic, just umka, depths of the ground, that must refer to even more than that, which would be the cisterns. And then it would no longer be a proof to Rav Dimi. Okay. Tashma, another support to Rav Dimi. V'lo esagag bizman sheyesh lamaka. So we know the Mishnah says that when you sell a house regularly, you don't acquire the roof of the house. When it has 10 tvachim, gavoa asar tvachim, and it has a fence around it. Why? Because that is its own domain, and it's not included in the living quarters of the house. And if you want to sell it, you have to specify it. But if you don't specify it, so then it's not included. Now, if you'll tell me, not like Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi said to acquire anything above or below the house, you have to write down umka varuma. Says the Gemara, but if you'll tell me, even without writing umka varuma, just by selling and just by saying the word house in the document, you've acquired the things that are directly above and below the house. So then, ki gavoa asar tvachim ma'yahave. Kevan de gavoa asar tvachim chashiv. So why have you not acquired the things above the house? Meaning, if regularly things above the house are automatically included, so then why do you have to have this specification that that it's not included? It should be included in the sale of the house. So it must be like Rav Dimi, that unless you specify, the heights of my house, then the things are not included. Yeah. Okay, maybe we'll stop here. I know there's a mission coming up. I want to be able to say it over better than I would.